Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Do you love to read or listen to books? Is your nightstand overflowing with books you just don't have time to read? Listen to my podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books with Zibby. I'm an author, publisher, podcaster, bookstore owner. My own novel, Blank, is out March 1st. And if you love books, you're in the right place. In fact, we call it the Zibbyverse, or rather, the LA Times calls it the Zibbyverse. Check us out, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books with Zibby.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
Welcome, guys, to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones with me, your heavy metal podcast host, Tony Evans. Welcome back from last week. I hope you enjoyed last week. It was a bit of a ramble, a bit of a weird one for me, but I really enjoyed it, the old Bonfire Night one. Those in the UK, if it's obviously just had Bonfire Night, I hope you've looked after yourself. No one got hurt and all the pets were okay, because a lot of the time the pets, I forgot to mention this, the dogs and cats get very scared during Guy Fawkes Night, and there was a big call, particularly here in Australia, to ban fireworks in most states. We've banned them here in Canberra. Hopefully that isn't the case there. You can still safely enjoy the heritage and the fireworks. Anyway, this week's episode is a bit longer, guys, so strap in. I was going to try and do it in my normal hour length, but I think it might go over. It's a two-parter. First part is a fan favourite, and the second part is one of my favourites and a pick I don't think you'd pick. If you listen to the show and you get to the half time and you think I know what it is, I'd be really surprised. Okay, I think some of you might get it, some of you might not. So this week's one is Judas Priest. I was going to do a Judas Priest album just for a bit of retro. I haven't done an album review for a couple of weeks, so I was just going to do a Priest one, and then I thought, I was sort of talking to my wife, and she said, why don't you do one on each part, and then you can sort of have a variant. And I thought, how do I do that without some of just two album reviews? So I figured I'll do fan favourite, which I think is going to be a new regular thing for me, fan favourite, and then my pick. I'm a big fan, so it's still technically a fan pick, but it's the one that most people get. So the first part of the show is about Judas Priest's British Steel. Now, he's 40 years old, 42 years old now, and it stands the test of time. Those out there who are new to the heavy metal genre and new to this podcast, Judas Priest are the undeniable princes, I think, of traditional heavy metal. I think the kings are Black Sabbath, and the princes are Judas Priest. And the reason I say that, don't get sort of uppity about it, but Sabbath invented the sort of sound, and Priest invented the style, I think. And they sort of took the Sabbath sound as well, mixed it with their love of Led Zeppelin and blues rock. And again, if you're new to the show, go back to the episode way back there. That's it's called "Where the Blues Go, Man," and we'll find out more about that. So this is their sixth studio album. It came out on the 11th of April 1980 on Columbia Records. It was the first album with Dave Holland on drums, recorded back in '79 and February and in December '79 and February 1980. It's 36 minutes long, but it was produced by Tom Allom. Now, Tom Allom, for those non-music nerds out there who don't know who he is, he recorded Priest, Sabbath, Crocus, Def Leppard, to name a few. So, really good pedigree when it came to this album. Now, the albums leading up to this, and the lead were still very heavy, still, because it was 1980, it was the sort of, they were right coming into that crest of the new wave of British heavy metal, which is, when there was a big ground of all the sort of heavy metal, getting the airwaves post the punk movement. And, they're from 74, they recorded Rock and Roller, Sour Wings of Destiny in 76, 77, Sin After Sin, 78, Stained Class, 78 again, in the same year they released Killing Machine, and then, of course, comes British Steel. Now, a lot of people out there will put Priest at this point into the new wave of British heavy metal genre, subgenre. It's incorrect. It's absolutely incorrect. It couldn't be further correct if you wanted to try about it, because new wave of British heavy metal is a collective of the hive mind of kids and getting together, making music from a certain point, and it's like saying that the Kinks are a punk band. They're a proto-punk band. I think the same with... Oops, sorry, my mic. What's happening there? Did you hear that? That was terrible. I knocked it. They're a proto-punk band. Sort of, I would call Priest a proto new wave of British heavy metal band, if I had to. Sorry, guys. Went back and just change the cable mic on the cable. Seamless edit. Hear that? Seamless edit. Anyway, yeah, I'll call them a proto because they were formed and their first album is 76. It's not 1980, which is the sort of 80, 81, which is that period of time for the new wave of British heavy metal. You can say 79, I suppose. Depends where picky you want to be, but it's still not. They weren't formed in that volcanic eruption of music. They were formed before then, doing blues covers and Zeppelin covers and Zeppelin-like music. That aside, they make an album that sits really, really well in the new wave of British heavy metal category. If you went into a record shop in 1980 when this came out, it would sit lovely in that, with Iron Maiden and Angel Witch and Diamond Head and so on. It would sit there really well, Motorhead and so on. It had two singles of it, Breaking the Law, released on the 23rd of May 1980, and United. Three singles: Living After Midnight, 21st of March 1980, Breaking the Law, 23rd of May 1980, and United, 15th of August 1980. Sorry about that, I can't read my own handwriting. What a surprise. The track listing goes as side 1, Breaking the Law, Rapid Fire, Metal Gods, Grind, and United. Flip it over to the B-side, you've got Living After Midnight, You Don't Have to Be Old to Be Wise, Rage, and Stealer. Now, I'm not going to go track by track through this epic album, I don't think, because firstly, most of you that have got this far in my podcast have already heard it. Most of you will already know about it, and I want those that don't know about it, who are listening now for the first time and are new to the genre, to go out and not go there with my words ringing in their ears. I want you to go there with virgin ears and enjoy it as much as I did the first time I heard it. Now, the first time I heard it was way back, I reckon 81. I reckon 81. I was like 9. No, what was I? It's 8. 8 or 9. Anyway, around that time, my brother and I would often on a weekend. Andy, my oldest brother, would take me into the West End just to kill time, do things. We'd go to like the British Museum and the Natural History Museum, and we just did the museums and sort of stuff like that. And but he would like to go to Carnaby Street, because in Carnaby Street there was the Great Frog. Now, the Great Frog is an amazing jewellery business, a jeweller, still there now. I highly recommend you going on their website and looking at their work. My brother Andrew had like lots of silver rings. He liked sterling silver, and they only work in sterling silver. And he had like these rings made with doll's eyes in them. Now, Toy Wilcox made it really popular, but I think Lemmy had one. Quite a lot of people had them. They also made the jewelry for a lot of horror movies as well. But they also made Bruce Dickinson's Eddie belt buckle for the Power Slave tour. Now, is it the Power Slave tour? I think it was Power Slave. Anyway, I didn't research that enough. I just sort of in passing. But we used to go to there, and brother would save up for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to buy himself a silver ring. And we'd be in there and they'd be playing Motorhead or Iron Maiden, and they were playing Judas Priest. I remember it because they were playing Living After Midnight. And Andy he didn't like really heavy music, but he liked all music. Like, he was mainly a soundtrack, some prog and a bit of folk, but he really liked occasional heavy bit of music, and he liked Priest. Andrew he had an alternative way of life, and I think he liked that. He liked the which is a nice way of saying he liked Rob Halford's image, I think. Anyway, so we were also, but not just that. So we came out. I remember being in there, and just up from there was a store that sold band T-shirts and like memorabilia and all that sort of stuff. And Andy bought me a Power Slave T-shirt, and he got himself a Judas Priest shirt, and I think it was Rock-a-Roller. So it had the Coca-Cola bottle on the front, because I think he liked it, but it wasn't too. It was white as well. It wasn't black, and I think he was like, I could wear this anytime, sort of thing. So that's when I was first introduced to this particular band and this particular album. I do vaguely remember my mate Daniel next door owning or listening to the whole album when we were like 12. Although he was into hip hop, he had the album. And it's a cracker of an album. It does exactly what it says on the bottle. With Priest, it's firstly, I should give you the lineup, shouldn't I? It's Rob Halford on vocals, as we all know. It should be Sir Rob Halford. Why he's not, I don't know. KK Downing and Glenn Tipton on guitars. Glenn Tipton, put my teeth backing, Tony. Ian Hill on bass, and Dave Holland on drums. We'll scoot over Dave Holland. He's got a very checkered past. I won't go into what has happened with him, what he did. You can look yourself. I think we'll leave it at that. But KK Downing and Glenn Tipton and then Ian Hill, what a absolute fantastic, trivia sort of triptych. That's the wrong word, isn't it? Trio. That's the right word. There used to be a chocolate bar when I was a kid called Trio. Trio, and Ian Hill is Ian Hill. He holds that bass line down very, very well. He's not doing anything special as Ian Hill. He's not running around that fretboard like Jaco Pastorius. He's not doing anything. He's usually just one octave below the guitar part, and he holds it down well. He's also got the one guitar. He's also got the one dance move. I won't ruin it for you. Just watch him live. Watch a video of him, and you'll see what I mean. And then of course you got Downing and Tipton. Like Wishbone Ash, like Iron Maiden, dueling guitars. It makes rock and roll. It makes heavy metal. I honestly truly believe the best heavy metal bands, apart from have the dueling guitars. Yeah, I know Motorhead doesn't, but that aside, the dueling guitars, right? The two guitars. Slayer is another one. They just feed off each other. One solos into another. The other has a different pattern. Someone's got more strengths and weaknesses, and it makes really, really fun rock and roll. And I think this is the thing about this album, is it's fun rock and roll. We get ourselves, and you'll find out in the second half about the show about this, but they get yourself wrapped up in all sorts of strangeness in this world of music, and what we lose is the pure spark and fire, as in the Revolution and Rebellion episode last week. We lose the fire of that music, Also, by the way, I missed a load out last week. I did do that rather sort of not off the cuff. I knew what I was doing, but I'd sort of, when I got off tangent, I went off tangent and I forgot about lots of other little pieces. I will catch that up again and do a second part of that. Anyway, but the most striking thing about the album is the artwork. I mean, the first thing that you notice is the artwork of Breaking the Law. So it's a hand holding a big razor blade. Now, it looks like the razor blade's cutting into the fingers of the hand. Those out there young who listen to this don't know what a razor blade is, and I'm sorry for the older people here, I'm going to just pander to the youth. A razor blade is a two-sided, very thin piece of Sheffield steel. They're usually made in Sheffield, where the band are from. Pressed in the steel. The best steel in the world is made in Sheffield. And it's pressed with a very, very sharp edge either side and holes in the middle. You'll see the picture on the album cover. And it would go in. My dad used to use, and my grandfather used to use them. My dad used an open razor, actually, a cutthroat razor. But my granddad used to use them. It was like you'd pop the blade into the top of the little razor, a safety razor it was called then, and you'd screw it down, and the blade would appear just enough out the sides of the edges so you could shave with it. And obviously people use them for other things as well, cutting up cocaine, self-harm, sadly. But the razor blade was used for a lot. It was at the time, which was controversial. It was the sign that there was a sort of symbol of the punks. The punks would have them dangling from their ears, and so on, and they ripped their clothes up with them, and it was a sign of if you think about it, it was the sort of artistic way. It was where the punks taking something that was of an old generation and destroying things with it, so destroying the new with the old and the old with the new and so on. But so there was big discussions around the band about that, because they were like, oh, okay, a lot of the metal bands were trying to distance themselves from punk, apart from like Motorhead, and it was Ian Hill's idea, and he said, no, I want to do it, and apparently the band thought it was a great idea, because of all the bands really that sort of, I think, identify with punk even more so than Motorhead, is Priest, because Priest were and still are a band about the exuberance and love and passion for rock and roll, heavy metal, and all that entails. And I don't think they don't look at music as a genre, as genres. I think that band there just play music because it's loud, fast, fun, and it creates an emotion that you're not expecting. It just elicits an emotion, which is what punk did. Whether you like it or not, whether you're one of those people that just hate it, that's fair enough. Again, that's eliciting an emotion, and I think that's why they didn't mind having the razor blade. Now, in certain parts of the world, the razor blade was airbrushed, so it looked like it was on the edge, the fingers on the edge of the blade, because in America, I believe, and possibly even Australia, I have to check in the Australian print. I've only got the UK and American print. It was too offensive or was too worrying to the record label. That it looked like it was cutting into the fingers. They deliberately didn't put blood on it, although I do believe there are prints where there is blood on it. Now, I think my mate Millsy's got a copy of one of those, which I'd have to one day try and purloin from him. I don't think it's very... I'd have to look into the actual... Maybe look into Discogs and see about that. But it's just striking, okay? The band liked the idea of having that punk connection. They also liked the idea of connecting with their grandfather's past with the razor blade. They also like the fact it connects with their town of Sheffield, where they were raised, where the stamping mills. I mean, Rob Halford tells a story about being at school, and the desks would move and the pens would roll because they were near the mills where they stamped the steel, and it would stamp. And he also, that's where they reckon that's where they get the sound of their band from, or where heavy metal comes from. Yeah, sort of, but then Black Sabbath is Birmingham, and that's also an industrial town. So I mean, there's not another episode to cover that, but heavy metal is a British institution derived mainly and forefrontly from industrial towns, dirty, sad, dilapidated mill towns, basically. And that's not going to go that people live out there because it's beautiful, those parts of the world. I'm just saying that's what it was back then. Now, where am I? Oh, yes. So it was designed, the actual artwork was done by Roslav Zazbo, Szaybo. So if I've butchered his name. And it took some time for him to put it together, to get it right. They really wanted the British steel stamped on the blade. They wanted it quite realistic, which is a hard thing to do, in that form. And I think having that stark black background really brings it up. Highlights on the album for me. I mean, I've got the album, by the way. I have on several versions on vinyl, CD, cassette, and I think somewhere in my collection is the 8-track version of it. Highlights for me, really, and standouts. I mean, you can do the Breaking the Laws and Living After Midnight, and they're staples of the show and of the band. But I think Rob Halford's sort of vitriolic spit of the lyric Grinder. I mean, it's sort of hilarious now because it's a gay dating app, isn't it? And how do we not know that Rob Halford was not homosexual? And I know that it was probably hidden because, again, people in the past were not as understanding. But, he comes out wearing studded leather and bondage pants and a little bondage hat and has a whip. Oh, 1 second, there's my phone going. 1 second, my girlfriend, guys. I'll be back in a moment. Bloody phone goes and you run to it, and by the time you get to it, it's not it. You don't get to it in time. When you get to it in time, it's not someone you want to talk to anyway. Anyway, that's an old man thing there, But so, this classic album. The reason it's a great album is that it was written when albums were made as albums, so you had to squeeze the songs on. It's 36 minutes and 10 seconds long. It's the ideal in length. It's a journey to work, it's a journey to school, it's a journey to the shops and back, it's a walk around the block, it's, a moment in your life which doesn't take the whole day up. Grinders, so the vocal cords, of course, the foot stamping industrial sound of metal gods, because of course it's not, you might think it's about being metal gods, as in we are metal gods. I personally think it's about the behemoth of steel stamping machines, the smoke billowing, the belching of flame and heat, the destroying of the men's lungs, the work in the foundries and the keeping the families alive, and of course, what you do, you may pray to that god to keep your food on the table, and I think metal gods do that. And yes, I know that lyric isn't necessarily that, but I think that's how I look at it. I also like don't have to be old to be wise. I mean, and the more I listen to that and the more I get older, the more I find it a really. It's a bit what it reminds me a bit of, actually. It reminds me a bit of the Jethro Tull song, Too Old to Rock and Roll. I think that's Too Young to Die. I think that's the. It just reminds me of that. It's a bit like that kind of thing. It's sort of, I think Howard and that time were coming into a certain age. They were also too old to be young, too young to be old, in that sort of liminal space, that space in between. And I think that's where that comes from. And, ending the album on Steeler, I think it's weakest on the album. I wouldn't end it that way. If I had to be honestly truthful, I would have ended it as United, because United is a brilliant song. It's a great single. It's great anthemic. It brings this. It's like Blood Brothers with Iron Maiden. It brings It brings you together. It brings a sing-along. It brings a sense of belonging and being part of... And that's exactly what heavy metal is for me, and always why I'm very passionate about it, is because it's a sense of belonging. I was saying I was with punk, and I am with punk. It's a sense of belonging. Whereas like prog, I find is a sense of look at me, I'm clever, you're not, kind of thing. Whereas you're not. I don't mean to be that way, but you know what I mean. It's a bit more conciliatory. Whereas I know another long word. Wheelbarrow, yeah, or Scarborough, another long one. Misanthrope is another one. Hey, look, I could chuck them all out. So the thing is that I would have ended in United, but it is what it is. Okay, the mix. What do I think of the mix? Yeah, the mix it's a little flat sometimes, I have to say, in the original print. But then again, my original vinyl print is really old, and I've played it too many times, and I'd say that's probably why that comes across that way. It does sound better in the 40th anniversary. I bought the 40th... Oh, another version. I've got the 40th anniversary Record Store Day picture disc, and that sounds really crisp. And I don't think it's been remastered. It may have been. I have to check. But that to me is a stronger sound. Look, I'm not going to go out track by track. It's an absolute classic. I just want you guys to take a listen. And let you know, give yourself a bit of a surprise if you haven't heard it, or we go back to it again and just give yourself another listen and see what you think about it. I've seen them live so many times, and so many times they do versions of most all the tracks. I think the only track I haven't seen live done on this album, to be honest with you, would be Steeler. Yep, it would be. I've even seen the Rage live, which is an unusual one to see live, but I haven't seen Steeler, and it's probably because I said I think it's the weaker on the album. And of course, when you've got 50 years of music to cover, and it's not an easy thing you can't just put any song on. Although I wouldn't mind them coming out and doing the whole of British Steel. That would be outstanding, wouldn't it? Can you imagine doing two parts in the same gig? It'd be British Steel first part of the show, and Stained Class in the second, or Painkiller. Wow, now that would be outstanding, wouldn't it? Anyway, that's the end of side one for now. I've got a little bit more to talk. The second side might take a little bit longer chat wise, because it's a little bit more complicated, I think. Anyway, I'm going to go and get a fresh cup of tea, because it's gone a bit cold. I like cold tea. I love cold tea, but when I'm talking, it's better to warm one because it helps with the vocals. And we'll come back the other side and chat about the next album. I'm not going to tell you what it is because I want you to stay listening. Okay, talk to you on the other side, guys. Bye now. Welcome back to part two, guys. This is going to be interesting. There might be some eye rolling, but it's interesting. So I had to think of an album of their very large catalogue that firstly you probably wouldn't think about, secondly you probably don't think about, and thirdly an album that I only just got back into during lockdown 1.0 here in last year, or the year before maybe. It all blends, isn't it? Anyway, it was much maligned when it was released. I absolutely personally love it, but it's something that you might not think about, and that is the epic concept album. Yes, I said that, concept album, Nostradamus by Judas Priest, the longest of their album output, their oddest of their album output, and I think sadly the most forgotten of their album output. released on the 16th. So it was their 16th studio album, and released on the 13th of June 2008. It's 1 hour. It's 102 minutes and 48 seconds long, so very long. It was released on 2 CDs, a special Digipack 3 CD, a 3 vinyl print, which I have, and I've got the CDs as well. I've also got the special book that came out, like a digibook. That came out with it. It was originally meant to be released in 2007 on Epic Records, but it got delayed. And it's the last studio album with the lineup, with the Painkiller lineup. So, sadly, KK Downing retired in 2011, 3 years later. Now, I'm very lucky. I got to see them on this tour with Dave, and funny story. We were staying at this. I let Dave do the hotels, right? We used to have a competition. Who could book the shittiest hotel? Look, it's a long story short, but I won it. It was horrendous. We didn't sleep there. We walked around Sydney. So he said he'd do it this time. So he ordered it. We booked in this place called Enfield in Sydney, and what was it, Edmonton? Enfield, and we thought we'd walk to the gig. It said on the, it said on the Googles, this is pre-smartphone, right? He said you can walk to the venue. Well, needless to say, it took Dave and I about an hour and a bit to walk to the venue. Down the main roads. It was hilarious, through suburbs. It was a good talk. It was a good walk. We got there in the end. I think were we at the beginning of my smartphones? We may have been 2008 anyway. And they only played 2 tracks off the album live. They were supported by Down, which is the Phil Anselmo abomination. I never liked the band he was in, and Down's even worse. But again, that's not here for me to. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm not here to talk about Pantera and my dislike for them. I'm here to talk about this album in front of me. So 2012. So yes, KK Downing left. So I got to see them with a really shit hot lineup. I remember the opening track, which is Nostradamus on the album. It's like there's a big stage, and they've got the image of Nostradamus on the back, and in the middle of the stage, the trapdoor opens, and up comes Rob Halford in this sort of glittery silver cowl and sort of like a monk's outfit, all hunched over. You can't see his face, and he's singing the opening tracks, underneath the, hidden in the cowl. It was amazing. We were way out in the gods though. We were way at the back, but it was still it wasn't the first time I seen him, but it was absolutely brilliant. Now, they'd toured this particular album with the Metal Matters tour with Heaven and Hell, Motorhead, and Testament. That would have been a great lineup, wouldn't it? They did that around Europe and in America to see what the album so people would do. Now, there have been many metal bands. It's now more so okay to do, but there've been many metal bands that have gone, let's make a concept album. Now, the concept albums don't have to say progressive rock. I know, yes, I say every episode prog, don't I? But it's not. It doesn't have to say progressive rock. Just because it's conceptual, it doesn't mean it's progressive. It just means that you're taking instead of taking a disparate array of musical ideas and having no direction, you're getting one direction and making that music lead that one direction. Yes, it is still proggy, I get you, but it's not necessarily proggy. If you think about Iron Maiden's Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, it's very progressive. I think, in fact, it kicks off, in my opinion, the progressive metal movement, along with Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche. But it's not necessarily, although Operation Mindcrime is more story-driven than Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And then, of course, you have, even earlier than that, you had Venom with At War with Satan, where the whole one side is a metal opera, a thrash black metal opera almost. So it's not a new concept. It is new to people that listen to Judas Priest, possibly, but it's not a new concept. It came to mind to their manager, Bill Kirbishley, when they were on tour, and then it was mooted around, and they all thought, well, this is a good idea. Let's give it a go. I mean, you have things very brave. Because 2008, 2007, 2008, apart from Maiden bubbling around, there wasn't a lot of really good metal on the, in the airwaves. It was still really being taken over by a lot of, the synth pop, the fake plastic bands, the bland purveyors of pop perversity, as I like to call them, were sort of, leeching and bellowing and belching into our faces on a regular basis, with their sort of insipid, floor-gazing rubbish. And we saw Bill Bailey on the weekend, and he said the same thing about Coldplay, and it's exactly what I mean. It's that real middle-of-the-road, middle-class blandness, and it's the same with things like Radiohead and stuff like that. Sorry if I offend you Radiohead listeners, I know that John's a big fan. It's just that nothingness, that voidal music that goes nowhere, has no balls, as my dad would say, no chutzpah, as my mum would say, right? So where was I going? Oh yes, so it's really brave to release this album, because they don't, let's be honest, by 2008 they don't have to prove anything to any fucker. It's Judas Priest. They don't have to do anything. They could release a triple album of Glenn Tipton singing, the Lord's Prayer in 10 different languages, to hip hop tracks, while KK Downing plays a sitar, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter, because they don't need to prove anything to anyone. They could make an album of cat noises. It wouldn't matter. Speaking, that's a little in joke there, guys, because if you ever go to Halford's website, he's a big cat lover, got lots of cats. Anyway, it's also the first time they've produced an album that has keys and chorus and a choir attached to it, which is sort of, again, that if you're going to be point fingers at prog, that's quite proggy, right? Now, those out there young who don't understand who Nostradamus is, Nostradamus was born Michel de Nostradami. It was Latinized to Nostradamus, in December 1503, and he died July 1566. He wrote the book Le Prophétie in 1555, and it's basically a book of poems. He was an apocrypher, so he was like he made potions. He was a doctor. He was a philosopher, and he wrote a book of poems that predicted, so they say if you read it, apparently, Hitler and the Iran-Iraq war, and some are saying now Putin, but you can read sort of anything into anything, really, and I'm a big believer in that stuff, but it's a little bit vague for me. And now, interestingly, the album, you would think, being a triple album, is a lot of effort to listen to, but it sold 42,000 copies in the first week. It went to number 11 in the Billboard Top 200, and that hadn't been done by the band before. It got beaten by them in 2014 for Remembrance of Souls, which got to number 6. All right. Still, what an amazing achievement for an album that, and I love it. I really love it, guys. But for an album, a lot of it could have been cut out. You could have got that down to 2 records quite comfortably, and that's what all the reviews said. Some said it was a self-indulgent pile of poo. Others say it was a magnificent album. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but one review even said it was on par with Yes's Tales from a Topographic Ocean, and Close to the Edge, which is like, wow, that's a big call. I don't know if I could put it in that same genre, that same sort of stratosphere, but it's still, someone thought that, and that's great. Interestingly, live they only played 2 tracks from the album, and Rob has come on and said he'd like to do the whole album live. It would be, it'd be amazing. They probably would. Again, it wouldn't matter if they came out and said we're doing Nostradamus live the whole album. They'd still sell out venues because it's Judas Priest, and I don't really know if anyone would mind, to be honest. They played Prophecy and Death, which is the 2 songs, which is, Death is actually one of the best songs on the album, but skipping forward. Now, what were the singles off of it? I did write that down. Yeah, so there's 2 singles. So Nostradamus was released for their webpage, not as a physical copy, on the 12th of April. And then Visions was released actually as a single on May 2008. And it's very much like trying to take singles off of Misplaced Childhood by Marillion. You can't do it when you've got an album like this, which is side 1, side 2, or in their case it's side 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. It's hard to find singles because you didn't write the album as a singles album. Really hard. But is what it is. Need to sell, have to have product, must have, nowadays they would release singles as they go virally on YouTube, and you'd get to the album and already know most of it. So it opens with Dawn of Creation, which is like a little instrumental, just gets you in. Now hold on, guys, this is a big set list, okay? A big set list. Prophecy, Awakening, Revelations, The 4 Horsemen, War, Sands of Time, Pestilence and Plague, Death, Peace, Confession, Lost Love, Persecution, Solitude, Exile, Shadows in the Flames, Visions, Hope, New Beginnings, Calm Before the Storm, Nostradamus, and Future of Mankind. It's a big old chewy, chocolate bar of an album. It really is. Now, again, I'm not going to go track by track. You have to listen to the album. It will tell you the story of Nostradamus. It will, of what you can get from it. I think it's also probably, to be fair, it's probably an analogous about modern life, about the prediction of modern life, and also what belief you could read into it that it's, if you listen to it, like you think, if you take what a man said in 1555 as read, are you more as gullible as someone who then picks up their smartphone, reads that vaccines are made by the CIA to control our brains? It's the same thing, isn't it? I think it's analogous in that respect, that it's probably saying that. Because I think 2008, not the birth of the internet, but the internet was at its height 8, 9 years old, and in everyone's household and on everyone's pockets. And I think the information that was being exported then is not probably as bad as it is now. As I said, I've got a little square slab of plastic and glass in my pocket that's infinitely deep, full of infinite morons. Infinite wisdom, but infinite morons. Give an infinite amount of monkeys an infinite amount of typewriters, and they'll write Shakespeare. Unfortunately, that's not the case with this one. I have written some listening notes, okay? I've written bombastic, overbloated, long-winded. Now, they sound negative, right? You think, oh, Tony, that's negative. Tone, that's negative. Yes, because it is. It is overblown, bombastic, and long-winded. But you know that going in. It's a 3-album concept album. If you don't go into a 3-disc concept album knowing that it's going to be parts where you go, well, time to make the tea, time to go and scratch my ass in the corner. I might go and book that flight while it's playing in the background. Then it's a concept album. There's always going to be widdly diddly, noodly woodly, moments. The difference is because it's a heavy rock album, a heavy metal album, those noodly woodly, middly widdly moments are actually really fucking good. The guitar solo in Revelations is just crazy for me. It's and the vocal gymnastics that Rob gets into on Persecution is delicious. I would stick. If you said, "Can I have 2 singles off this album?" I'd have Revelations and Persecution, by a long way. I really love Four Horsemen because Four Horsemen, again, says what it does on the tin. It's very gallopy. It's a lot of fun. It is a dark album. I mean, it is very dark because it is about a man predicting the end of the world, and it's about it's not about an album about, let's talk about Nostradamus and his day-to-day life, what he bought for breakfast, where he went for lunch, what he was wearing on a Monday. It was none of that business. It's all about his book and the interpretation of his book. Very brave. I think that if you're going to go out on an album, KK, this is the way to go out. Now, you might shake your fist and go, "What do you mean go out on this album? It's pretty inaccessible." Sorry, 1 second. Not just knocking, bang, crash. Okay. I don't think it is. I think it could be reissued, and maybe it might do in 2028 when it's 20 years old, and they might edit out some of the tracks, but I think, why would you? When I said before I thought that Ian Hill was quite one-dimensional in most of his album, in all the albums, I don't want to be disparaging Ian Hill because I'm a bass player. I know many bass players, and I understand that it's not, even people think it's an easy instrument. It is not an easy instrument because you're either lambasted for being just a dum 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 boom 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 dum person, or you're all over the place and nonsensical because you're trying to be a lead instrument. Like I learned to play the bass so as a solo instrument on my own, with no band, and this is before the internet, so you could just like play along to tracks. I'd put on albums and try and copy them, but most of the time I'd sit there and I'd play the bass like a lead guitar because sitting there hitting a note and waiting for 2 beats to hit another note, it's really tedious if you're practicing. I'd learn my scales and I'd play on my scales, and then I was trying to copy Steve Harris where he chords a lot, so I was trying to chord a lot. Same with Yes's Chris Squire, he chorded a lot, so did Geddy Lee, and Paul McCartney. I was trying to do all that, and so it's a difficult instrument. Now, I'm sidetracking a bit there, but on this album, Ian lets loose. Now, these guys are of an era where they would have listened to prog back in the early 70s. They would have been around some of that hippie movement stuff, as I mentioned last week, with the free love, free drugs, and open mind. I mean, so, but Ian would have gone, well, it's rock and roll. And also I know that Ian's a big fan of the Stones, and the Stones it was very much on the beat, or just behind, or just, that simple. 1 second. I don't know why my computer got turned off there, because it just did. So you sort of, I think this is his best album bass wise. The whole tone of the album, it was recorded in several studios across Europe, and it has a really deep sort of, it is almost spectral as a sound. It's heavy metal. There's a limitation of what a heavy sound can be like, but I think within those limitations, all 4 of them absolutely kill it. Absolutely kill it. yes. So, there are weaknesses on the album, because I don't really like Exiled, and I think Shadows in the Flames doesn't really do it for me. Sands of Time, get a bit weak. War is brilliant, and what is it good for? Absolutely nothing, right? As we know. But War and Death, those ones, because they're the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, like, I think that alone, if you did an EP with Judas Priest doing the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, like the brilliant New Album band Holocaust did, it would just be outstanding, wouldn't it? Can you just, those, it would take in all the fluff out. But I think the fluff is the fun, I think, sometimes with this album. So what I'm saying is, it wouldn't have been I don't think it would have been a pick for most people out there. I don't know if a lot of Judas Priest fans, particularly on this side of the world, have listened to it. If they have, they haven't given it time. I'm sure it's the least most played album. I reckon that and Rock and Roller, because it's an older album and not as heavy. People go on that Turbo was a terrible album with all the synth stuff, but people will come back subsequently and like me, love that album. I have to say that it was at least, gosh, it would be 10 years, maybe even longer, between listening to this album. It was lockdown when I decided I would go to my record collection and sort of go through alphabetically, and I did get to J, and it was a long old haul, that one. And I got to J because I do have a huge collection, and I got to J and I'll do Priest, and I didn't do P because I thought, well, J, I'll just do J. I was going first letters, although, to be honest, T would be useless, wouldn't it? Now I think about it. It was actually, I don't know, my record collection is mixed all over the place. I sometimes have it alphabetically, sometimes I don't. But I got to J and I thought, Judas Priest, right? I don't have many bands with J, so they're in J. I've got quite a few in for P, mind you, so that's why they're in J. And that's my logic. Stranger that is. And I thought, well, no. I listened to most of the back catalogue, but the one that stuck out to me, and I thought, hang on, I haven't played Nostradamus in God knows how long. Again, I think it was because back then I was a bit snobby about, I wanted, and I was going through a phase back in sort of 2010, 11, maybe 12, where I wanted it just to be extreme. And I don't know whether and I think that Priest was sort of like everything, was just put on the back burner. I didn't listen to Maiden much either, because I wasn't enjoying those early 2000 Maiden albums, and I was really getting more into the sort of your extreme bands. I was getting back into Venom again, and I was getting into the Norwegian stuff, and I was doing your Deicides and your Slayers and stuff. Subsequently, though, since lockdown, I managed to reacquaint myself with this album, and I can see why they sold so many copies in the first week. Now, they may have sold so many copies in the first week because there'd been some time between drinks, and it was a Priest, and as I said, the radio airwaves were consumed by blandness and insipidness and drudgery, that those fans out there with a bit of cash in their pocket, because they were probably, coming of age, the Painkiller fan group were coming a bit older, and when they had, more money in their pockets, because they probably finished their college years, earning money, full-time work, left university, whatever, and so they thought, oh man, gonna get the new Priest album. Because it's like the rite of passage, isn't it? Anyone that listens to heavy metal will go through that rite of passage. It will be your Led Zeppelin, your Deep Purple, your Black Sabbath, and then it will go into your Iron Maidens, your Motorheads, your Judas Priest, and then you'll move to your Metallicas and your Slayers and your Anthraxes and your Megadeths, and then onto the onto the black stuff, onto Bathory and Gore Goth and Gore Guts and all that sort of stuff. Celtic Frost, Hellhammer, Venom. You just move in these different phases, and I think that's why it did so well in the first week. I think it failed dramatically in Europe, and I don't think it sold. In fact, I remember something like reading somewhere that in Australia, when I went to see the band, in fact, that's right, because I'd looked them up, the sales for the album, and I think we saw them, it only sold something like 165 units in that first 6 weeks or something in Australia, which is really criminal, and it's probably why they don't tour here as much as they should, because they don't get the record sales. Although the last album absolutely was such a corker of an album that it sold massively here, because they toured here with Download and then had their own solo album tours. But in conclusion, guys, I managed to wrap this up in just on an hour, which is great. In conclusion, the first album that we spoke about, British Steel, an absolute gold classic, standard classic. It's there, isn't it? It's there with your Number of the Beasts, your In Rock, all those sort of big behemoths of the genres. It is there with it, right? And I think that it can never be forgotten. It will never go away. Sadly, though, I think Nostradamus is one of those things that could become an endangered species, because they're either... if those out there who listen to my show who really are into progressive metal, and there's a lot of you out there, now progressive metal does have this tendency to be very technical, and it's full of suspended sevenths, augmented ninths, jazz chords, extreme technical speed, ferocious, unbelievably tactile drums. It's keyboards. It's all that sort of stuff. This, as I said before, just because it's a linear story doesn't mean it's technically what I would call a progressive album, because musically it's not progressive. For the band, it's progressive because it has choir and keyboards, but it's not what I would call a traditional progressive rock album. So those out there who'd like their prog, hey, jump in and have a listen to this, because it may be a window to the wonderful world of prog again. You never know, right? It might open up your eyes. It's definitely it didn't open my eyes because I've loved prog since I was like 7 or 8, so it makes no difference to me. But it might ease you in a bit. I do know friends of mine I've mentioned it to in passing. They've tried it and they couldn't get into it because there wasn't any sonic input points. Like sometimes some albums you put them on and it's like, oh god, no, skip, I'm in. And then once you've got in, you go back and you go try and listen to the bit you have to skip, and then you go, well, no, I'll skip it still, or I'll move the needle to the next track, or I'll fast forward the tape or whatever, because you just can't get into it. But there are points where you can jump in, and I think this album doesn't have those jump in points because the story is told so well and so linearly that if you miss the first 2 or 3 songs, you don't have any way of understanding what comes. Okay, now I don't often do this, but this is my way for you to listen to this album. When you finish listening to this program, if you think, I'm going to go and listen to the album now, Tone says listen to it, do me a favour, block out the 102 minutes. Don't have anything to do in that 102 minutes apart from listen to this album. I do it, I lie in my bath when I do it, and I really just put the light out and I just immerse myself, because if there's too much light for me and too much going on, I can't get the music to dance in my head. So I need no distractions. I don't know how people can do things and listen to music to actually analyze it. Just to listen as passing, of course I do. I put music on when I'm walking, when I'm going to work, when I'm in fact, every moment of my day has something going. But when I really want to get into it, that's what I'll do. If I was a smoker, it'd be a cigar, a glass of brandy or whiskey, or a decent dark ale, light off, music on, noise cancelling headphones, or a really, really good stereo system. Try and play it, not stream it if you can, so you can get it more analog, because I think that's the best way to hear it. If you can't, stream it, that's fine. Just do that for me, and just get through it. It's only, I know it sounds like a lot, 102 minutes, that's a lot of time of your life, and we're all time poor, but there are times when you can do it. Don't do it when you go to bed, because you'll fall asleep, you won't hear it. You'll try and get back in, and you won't know where you were. It's like reading a book without a book. You need a bookmark, but even if you bookmark it, you might like reading a good book. You leave it for a few days. You go, oh geez, what was that? What was I reading about? What was it about? What happened then? Particularly when you're my age, because you don't remember yesterday or 20 minutes ago, let alone an hour before. So you need to give yourself time for it. British Steel, you still do the same, but British Steel is a 30 odd minutes, and it's a moment of joy that can be consumed and listened to at any point, really, anywhere, anytime. It doesn't matter. Probably not at a funeral or something like that. But although you never know. I'm sure that someone has been sent off this mortal coil with the dulcet tones of Halford playing in the background. It's not a bad idea, really, truly. But yes, give yourself that time. Then tell yourself what you think. Go away, give it a week or two away from it, come back, do it again. Don't play it in conjunction with other Priest albums, because it won't work. It doesn't sit. It's not Painkiller. It's not Screaming for Vengeance. It's not Stained Class. It's not Turbo. It's not British Steel. It's not any of those. It's such a diametrically different album, and I think that's where the wondrousness occurs with it, and why it's such a sumptuous piece of modern, almost operatic music. It really lifts me when I listen to it, and it really just makes me so smile, because it means that these intelligent men are making intelligent music, and it's not just heads to the wall thuggery that can be the case in a lot of metal music of any genre or subgenre. It's just smart. It's really smart and very, very brave. And on that note, I'm going to let you go. Go and do that. Go listen to the album. Let me know what you think. I love it, and I always will love it. More so now since I've revisited it, and now that I have that connection that I was in lockdown, it makes me think of lockdown and things that went on, and it makes you sort of smile a bit. Whether I could reconnect with my family and my music. And that's when I started the podcast, back in lockdown. So, this is very important for me, and hopefully for you. That's it for this week. Talk to you next week. Keep safe. Go and listen to the albums. Bye for now.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Do you love to read or listen to books? Is your nightstand overflowing with books you just don't have time to read? Listen to my podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books with Zibby. I'm an author, publisher, podcaster, bookstore owner. My own novel, Blank, is out March 1st. And if you love books, you're in the right place. In fact, we call it the Zibbyverse, or rather, the LA Times calls it the Zibbyverse. Check us out, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books with Zibby.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.